Well, here's a question. Do you think that Hamas intentionally fights to induce civilian casualties?
Yeah, no.
Both parties do it.
Okay. So if you're not willing to admit that, you don't live in reality. Like, I don't know what to say.
No. How dare you resist our oppression of you?
October 7th was not resistance. That wasn't resistance. That was just like mass slaughter and rape of civilians. That was not resistance. What do you mean? October 7th was not a resistance attack.
I mean, this is absurd.
Zionism today means Jewish supremacy between the river and the sea. There is no other way to describe it.
Today, I'm hosting a debate about the war in Israel with host of the Young Turks, Cenk Uygur, social media personality Stephen Bonnell, otherwise known as Destiny, and journalist Gideon Levy. Cenk, let's start with you and talk about what's happening right now in Israel. So Israel have gone into Gaza. They said they've wiped out most of the battalions of Hamas. I think 19 out of 21 or 20 out of 21. They said most of what Hamas have. They've killed 2 former leaders. Is there any chance of peace?
Well, that's 100% dependent on the Israelis, because there's nothing left of Hamas. There's almost nothing left of the Palestinians. Over 43,500 people killed. There's 80% of the buildings destroyed in part, 90% of the population displaced. How much murder, mayhem, and slaughter is enough? And so the Palestinians and all of the Arab League is ready for a peace deal. In fact, Hamas said yes to a ceasefire deal that Israel proposed back in July. So the reason Israel is not going towards peace is because this was never about defending itself. It was always about land acquisition. So Smotrich, now cabinet minister, making it very clear and brazen, saying they're going to annex the West Bank and all of Judea and Samaria, which sounds like and is from the river to the sea. So this has always been a genocidal land acquisition. Now they're going into Syria, severe violations of their sovereignty. They're in southern Lebanon, more land, all while pretending to defend themselves. So if Israel wants a peace deal and a ceasefire, it could have it tomorrow, and everyone knows that. It's Israel that's being the warmongers, the aggressive colonial imperial empire that could tax every one of its neighbors, slaughters them, and then takes their land.
Don't you think they need to, as someone who's living right next to Hamas, who wants to kill them and wants to kill the whole of Israel?
No, nonsense. This is what every imperial empire does. We have a right to defend ourselves. Look, I just did a debate last night at UCLA about international law regarding this. And as I researched genocide after genocide, Srebrenica, the Armenian genocide, and a dozen others, it's always the same pattern. The aggressive empire that is occupying and colonizing says, oh, I can't believe they resisted our occupation. They're the terrorist, terrible people. We have to kill them all because we have a right to defend ourselves. And then they talk about land acquisition. They say, well, we need a little bit extra room to protect ourselves for security. And then we need more room, and we take more and more land. And every time, in every instance, they say, well, these no good insurgents, resistance, terrorists are hiding in their civilian population, so they made us kill all their civilians. As I explained last night about the Armenian genocide, where were they supposed to go? The Armenians that were resisting the Ottoman occupation. They were supposed to set up military barracks and go, hey, Ottomans, we're right here. Come and kill us. That's not how any of these resistance movements work. The occupation is brutal. It is the cancer in the Middle East. It is what is causing all of the problems. And just in July, the Knesset voted 68-9. All 9 were the Arab parties. So every Jewish party in Israel voted, there will never be a Palestinian state. So what do you do with a brutal occupier that says, I will never allow you to exist? I will dehumanize you. I will kill you anytime I want. And now starving the people in northern Gaza. So what do you do with a brutal actor like this? I'm pushing for peace with everything I've got. But the reality is there's only one person or one group that could decide. This is Netanyahu, Ben-Gvir, and Smotrich. And they have shown 1,000 times over, they're not interested in peace. They're not interested in humanity. They're interested in land. And everything else is nothing but sheer propaganda.
So you mentioned that the Knesset said that they voted to never have a two-state solution. I was in Israel a couple of weeks ago, and I was in the Knesset, and they told me that they voted. One of the liberal Knesset members told me that they voted that there shouldn't be a two-state solution right now, not never.
Oh, okay. It's been 57 years. And by the way, good news. Hamas says in their charter, Israel shouldn't exist. But for now, you never know. They might change their mind tomorrow. Because you know how many times we've heard that excuse? Oh, no, we have to kill all the Palestinians because Hamas, an extremist group that naturally arises in any occupation. Moderates do not rise up to resist an occupation. Extremists do. And we've heard 1,000 times, they're not allowing Israel to exist. Israel already exists. What a preposterous thing. And they've already said publicly many years ago that they would take that away. Now, Israel says, no, I literally am not allowing the Palestinians to exist. And I voted to say they should never exist, but you never know. I could change my mind tomorrow. And really, Ellie, you know this. Do the liberals in Israel, and Gideon could answer this, do they have any power? No, they're totally 100% out of power. The right-wing lunatics are in charge. And unfortunately, and this is what breaks my heart, because I'm still crazy and naive enough to believe in Israel and to think that it could make a comeback, that it could turn into a country that we all love and brings, goodness in the world. But right now, it is on a super dark path. And there is no excuse for, I'm not going to allow you to exist. I'm going to occupy and enslave you for the rest of time. And I'm the good guys. And when you resist, I will murder so much of your population, it will shock the world. How is that in any way the good guys?
Gideon, let's move on to you. What do you think? Do you think there's any chance for peace?
Not at the coming time. Not at all. Peace with whom? With Israel, who has no intention to make peace, with Hamas, who has no intention to make peace, with Hezbollah. I mean, it is so much off the table that the word by itself, peace, is off the table for a long time, at least in Israel. Who speaks about peace? Give us a ceasefire of 1 week, we'll be so grateful. Who speaks about peace now? Who can talk about peace? Who can dream about peace? It's off the table. Now, the terminology is, how long will we stay in Gaza? Will it be forever or maybe less? How big and wide will be the ethnic cleansing of the northern part of Gaza? Will it stop before the city of Gaza or after Gaza City? Those are the real questions now. And peace is really off the table. I mean, it's really so much not realistic even to mention it.
Okay. Stephen, what do you think?
Same answer. No, I don't think it'll happen for the same reason I said before. I think people view this incredibly differently on both sides. People have totally different stories about what's happened, and those two stories are irreconcilable. So as long as people still have like a totally different accounting in their mind of the things that have happened or why they've happened, there's no possible way that there can be reconciliation between both sides.
Do you think that there's a change of leadership in America? Do you think that will change anything?
I mean, maybe accelerate Palestinians on the path to destruction. I mean, with Trump is the Huckabee appointment as the ambassador to Israel is insane. I don't think that Trump is like a rabid pro-Zionist. I think he just likes Israel because old people like Israel. But from what I've heard of the Huckabee guy say, that guy, he knows all the Zionist lingo. I guess if you're a Westerner, anytime you hear somebody say like West Bank, I don't know what that is. You mean Judea and Samaria? That's like a huge dog whistle for, oh, this dude is fucking insane. Every time you hear that. So yeah, I don't know, man. Yeah, I don't think it looks good for I would say for the Palestinian people with Trump as president.
What about with
by the way,
Abrahamic Accord?
By the way, it doesn't look good for Israel either. It looks very good for the apartheid. It looks very good for the settlers. It looks very good for continuing the occupation. It looks very good for more wars. But for the benefit of Israel, this administration is a catastrophe.
What about that they created the Abrahamic Accord? What about that they created the Abrahamic Accord?
So that's total nonsense. So what they did was, hey, all the people who want to make money with Israel, do you want to ignore the Palestinians and sign a nonsense peace deal on when we all agree already? And they're like, oh, yeah, sure. By the way, the real peace deal is all of the Arab nations have very clearly stated that they are totally in favor of a peace deal. They right to exist for Israel. There's no question about it. Look, the debate is nonsense. There is one clear aggressor here. They're the ones who are rejecting peace. They're the ones who are grabbing land. And Gideon's on the ground, and he's telling you they're going to occupy and ethnically cleanse Gaza. Smotrich just told you they're going to try to annex the West Bank. This is as bad as it gets. I mean, this is a genocidal government that thinks, hey, we're back to the bad old days. We conquer people, we kill them, we humiliate them, and there's nothing the world can do about it. But I think there's two things here. One is something that is not at all hopeful, and the other is a little bit hopeful. So maybe. The thing that's not hopeful is, look, in all this time, I'm trying to protect Palestinian lives, now Lebanese lives, now, on and on, Iranian, Syrian, Israeli, all these lives, because war gets them all killed. Peace is the better path. I believe that we could have two beautiful states next to one another. But I'm also trying to protect Israel, because this is madness. And forget Israel. Honestly, I'm trying to protect my Jewish friends and family. And Israel is driving intense hatred, not just towards Israelis, but people aren't going to be rational and say, oh, no, that's the right-wing government of Israel. Israel can have a different government. It doesn't really represent all Jews in the world. People, unfortunately, don't think that rationally. So now they have driven anti-Semitism, what, tenfold, 100-fold, 200-fold, all across the world. And now I'm afraid the Jews aren't going to be safe anywhere. This is insanity. Stop, you monsters. What are you doing to Israel, let alone Palestine? So that's the darkness. Now, in terms of a slight possibility, I'm not saying that it's likely. It's unlikely. But Trump is a wild card. If any normal establishment, Republican or Democrat, was elected, they would bow their heads to Netanyahu and do 100% of what he wants. Trump will give him 200% of what he wants, unless you piss him off one day. And if one day he thinks that this position is making him less popular, and he doesn't need any more money to run for re-election, he doesn't need the $137 million in legalized bribes that Miriam Adelson gave him. And by the way, that's why we have Huckabee, Elise Stefanik at the UN, Mike Waltz as National Security Advisor, Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. That is Team Miriam. Those are the people in the Trump administration that are Israel first, America second. Okay, so that's the bad news. But I've seen Trump betray every creditor in his life. And I've seen him turn around on a dime and do things that are totally unexpected. So if this position makes him intensely unpopular, because it will, because Trump is going to lead to more war and more war. And when he does, and his anti-war base gets super pissed, if they get super pissed, there's your ray of tiny little bit of hope that Trump will go, yeah, I already got all the money from you idiots. I'm done with you. We're cutting off the funding. Now, if that happens, then that helps Israel, because right now they're in a situation where power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And they have 100% of the power, and it's driving them to make all the wrong decisions. And a good friend would take us out of that bar fight, right? And stop the madness. And the way you do that is to cut all funding to Israel.
Stephen, I just want to ask you specifically one of the things that Cenk said, which is that Israel is occupying Gaza, and that's why you see a lot of the retaliation from there. What do you think of that?
I mean, it's hard to prove counterfactual, but I mean, if you're Israeli, you're just going to say we did. We withdrew from Gaza in 2005, and we got Hamas. We withdrew from Lebanon. We got Hezbollah. I mean, these are going to be the arguments that every Israeli makes, and it's kind of hard to argue against that. So, I mean, I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I can argue against it. You did a peace deal with Egypt. It worked perfectly. And so you never made a peace deal with Gaza. You just said you kind of have sovereignty, but not really. We can come in and kill you anytime we want. We could cut off your electricity. We could cut off your food supply. We can starve you to death. That's not sovereignty. That's not a real deal. So, and why is Hezbollah attacking? We can say they're terrorists and they're terrible. Fine, no problem. But they're attacking because of the occupation. Same thing for Hamas. Look, the absurdity, and look, and I'm encouraged by Destiny's outlook so far. He's saying this is the Israeli position, because in the old days, I don't know what he feels today, and maybe we'll find out more as we go, but defending the Israeli position is indefensible. The jury's in, and it doesn't. The people of Israel can believe anything they like, but they're not going to change the minds of the rest of the world who have seen the dead children and the rubble. And we all have eyes. All of Gaza's utterly destroyed and annihilated. So they can do all the propaganda in the world, and they can convince themselves, oh, yeah, we had to kill them. We had to occupy them. They're such savage terrorist Muslims. They can never do peace. All they understand is violence. That's why we had to murder them. But no one else in the world believes that nonsense. They look more ridiculous and more insane and more genocidal by the day. Please turn around, Israel. For God's sake, you're doing untold damage. It's going to take 100 years to undo this damage.
Stephen?
I mean, Israel made peace with Egypt, but that's because Egypt had a Sadat figure. Well, they had a Sadat to make peace with. I don't think the Palestinians have ever been represented by somebody who was so willing to actually try and make peace. I also think that it was a bit easier for Egypt to make peace with Israel because Egypt had a country to have after the peace deal, right? Like, give us back the Sinai, and we have our country, and we can be peaceful. And they have their borders, and they've got their territory, and they feel that that's like a just end to I guess, hostilities between Israel and Egypt. For the Palestinians, what a just end looks like, I don't think has ever even been clearly enunciated, let alone does every Palestinian or every Palestinian group or leader have the same idea of what a just end would look like, which makes it a lot harder to negotiate.
Real quick, I want to let Gideon speak, but look, you don't negotiate with your friends, you negotiate with your enemies. Before they made the deal, they thought Sadat was the most monstrous terrorist of all time. And remember, Sadat did lead all of the Arab nations to attack and invade Israel, a much bigger war against Israel than what Hamas has done. So they said, and all the right-wingers at that time said, there's no way Egypt will do it. What a naive, ridiculous thing. They'll keep bombing us. We should have never done it. We should never give the land back. You cannot trust those dirty Muslim savage terrorists. And they were wrong. They were 100% wrong. And it helped Israel tremendously to neutralize all the Arab nations trying to attack them. The obvious answer is peace. And it's just heartbreaking that they're choosing not to do that.
Gideon, so I want to ask you a question about peace. So you look back in history, you see Yitzhak Rabin, as Cenk mentioned, doing peace with enemies, not with friends. I mean, you could also do it with friends, of course, but you do a lot of pieces. You try and do that with enemies. Yitzhak Rabin tried. He almost did it. What do you think? There's any chance at all that either Trump or not even Trump, but just is there any chance that Israel could do peace with Hamas if they wanted to?
First of all, Yitzhak Rabin tried, this is true, but he didn't try enough, and he didn't try good enough, and he wasn't courageous enough. The fact that he was murdered made him a mythological peacenik, but he wasn't such a peacenik. The fact that the Oslo Accords didn't touch the core issue of the settlements, the fact that Israel under Rabin wasn't even ready to freeze the settlement project, just show the intentions of Israel. It was a way to unease the occupation, to make it softer, to make it easier to live with. This was not peace, and this was not a real recognition in the rights of the Palestinian people as equal rights to the Jewish rights in this piece of land. Rabin was all along against a creation of a Palestinian state, and in those years, a Palestinian state was something achievable, unlikely today when you cannot have it anymore, but then you could still have it. But he didn't believe in it. We just yesterday, they published some expressions of him which were released from the archives. He said very clearly, he said two things. One, there will be never a military solution to the conflict, which is very nice of him. But in the same time, he said, a Palestinian state will only lead us to war. So he didn't believe in their right to have a state. So let's not exaggerate about Rabin and about his efforts to do peace. He did something. He made some steps, but they were far off being enough. And I'm not sure, by the way, if he wouldn't be assassinated, if he would have gone much further. practically, I knew him very well personally. I'm not sure he wouldn't go on much further than this. But right now, really, I get back to this, Eli, that talking about peace now is totally far-fetched. I don't even know to find the words. Let's get to a ceasefire. Let's get to a withdrawal from Gaza. Let's get for a rehabilitation of Gaza. Let's stop the suffering of the people of Gaza. To speak now about peace is, I mean, I'm incapable of talking about peace now because knowing Israel and also knowing the atmosphere in Gaza today and in the West Bank, this is not on the table. It's like speaking now about getting to the sun. We cannot get to the sun, and we cannot get for peace now. Let's first of all fix the urgent things. I have my vision for peace. It's the one-state solution. It's a democracy between the river and the sea. It's a one-man, one-vote system where everyone will be equal, Palestinians and Israelis. It will be one democracy like any other democracy in the world. But it's not the time even to talk about it.
Do you think that the Jewish people deserve a state?
Totally, and so do the Palestinian people. But Israel did anything possible to prevent the Palestinians of having a state, and they will never have it because 700,000 settlers, Jewish settlers, will never be evacuated. And as long as they are there, there is no room for a Palestinian state. So you can't have it all. If you want a Jewish state, you had to evacuate the occupied territories of 67. That's the minimum of the minimum. And you have to let it become a viable state, not a Bantustan, a viable state with army, yes, with army like Israel, like any other country in the world. But Israel was not willing to do it. And when you are not willing to do it, you miss the chance. And I don't see that right now there is a chance. The Jews have the right to have their own state as long as the Palestinians have the same right. Once the Jews prevent it from the Palestinians, they also in many ways prevent it from themselves, because then there is no Jewish state. There is an apartheid state or a binational state.
Okay, so let's talk about, instead of talking about peace, let's talk about what's happening right now in Gaza. So Cenk, I want to go to you and ask you about the war in Gaza. You know, do you think Israel should just unilaterally withdraw back into Israel from Gaza? What do you think should happen from here going forward?
Look, if you wanted peace, the answers are actually really simple. So you withdraw from Gaza, obviously. I mean, how much more can you destroy Gaza? And the idea of, taking more land for security is just obvious propaganda to do more colonial occupation and take more Palestinian land, more Arab, etc. So withdraw. And Hamas already agreed to the July ceasefire. Do something along those lines. You could actually literally do that and be done with it. But that's not really going to solve the issue. The issue, that's going to at least stop the bleeding, literally, right? And they should definitely do that. But then you make a peace deal with the Palestinian Authority, give them the credibility to drive out Hamas from Gaza. But in order to do that, the only way that the Palestinian Authority would have that credibility is if they deliver on a Palestinian state. But unfortunately, Gideon's right. I mean, not just Netanyahu, not just his monstrous cabinet filled with terrorists, but unfortunately, and this is the most heartbreaking part, the Israeli population doesn't want it. They want more land. They want to crush the Palestinians. They think the Palestinians are the Nazis. And they have PTSD from the Holocaust, and they're playing out some sort of, unfortunately, sick fantasy, like this time we're going to get them. But the Palestinians aren't the Nazis. In that analogy, they're the Jews. So the fact that the Jewish state is doing this is even more heartbreaking. So if you want peace, it's clear. You go to Abbas, yeah, he's got problems. Yes, he's been a little bit obstinate before, but my God, would he love to retire as the hero that brought a Palestinian state. My God, would he love to drive out Gaza, who's his enemy, from Hamas out of Gaza, that's his enemy. And so this is very doable. But I want to ask Gideon, because I came on mainly to talk to Gideon because he's such a hero in a lot of ways. Look, the culture now in Israel feels so right wing, so pro war. It seems nearly unbreakable. The only things that I can imagine is if there's some sort of traumatic event that, but the problem is that if it's more war, it just digs them into a more right wing and more war hawk position, right? And if they have absolute power, it digs them into a more right wing, more pro war position because there's no downside. So it feels like an inescapable puzzle here. But the only thing I could imagine then is America cutting the funding and American Jews saying, no, we've had enough. This is terrible. And you have to turn around. Otherwise, we're not supporting you anymore. Would that begin to be enough of a jolt to the Israeli culture where they begin to rethink some things, or no?
So first of all, your observation is very right. It's not only about the right-wingers. It's also about the so-called peace camp in Israel. Not only totally vanished after the 7th of October, rightly so or not rightly so, I have my doubts how solid was it from the first place. Look at what's going on now in Gaza. There is opposition to Netanyahu, very vocal one, very devoted one. There is a protest against the government that doesn't release the hostages. And there is hardly any criticism about the crimes of war in Gaza. It's hardly being even covered in the Israeli media. It's actually not covered at all. Israelis don't want to know about it and don't care about it at all, including what used to be the peace camp. So my first problem is not the right-wingers, but the Zionist leftists, who are or the mainstream central left. They are not so different. They don't like the rhetoric of the right-wingers, but do you think they resist this war? Not at all. They support it. Do you think they resist the war in Lebanon? Not at all. They support it. So we are really facing, and to this I have to add one more thing, Cenk, and this is the younger generation. Unlikely most of the societies in the West, or at least as far as I know them, in Israel, the young generation is much more nationalistic, much more racist, much more conservative, and much more religious than the older one. So how can you see a change here? The change will come only from the outside. It's not guaranteed. First of all, we are facing now this lunatic administration. I don't know what to expect from the Americans. On one hand, Obama doesn't want wars, but all his nominations in foreign policy are those who will push Israel for war. Who will, for example, stop now Israel from settling in Gaza? The new Secretary of State, the lunatic ambassador in Tel Aviv. Who is going to stop Israel from settling in Gaza? Tomorrow they will come with an idea to settle in southern Lebanon. Why not? Who is going to stop them? This administration. Unless Donald Trump will surprise and say, guys, that's not my way, and I'm the one who decides I don't want a war there. And then he can make a difference, because Netanyahu, if there is someone that Netanyahu is afraid of, it is Donald Trump. He was never afraid of Joe Biden. He knew he can totally ignore all his condemnations and advices and warnings. He knew very well that this is a paper tiger that say one thing and does exactly the opposite. So in a very ironic way, Donald Trump is the hope. Civil societies in the world are the hope. The civil societies in Europe who had enough. Maybe also, you mentioned rightly, parts of the Jewish community in the United States. Change will not come from within Israel. Forget about it.
Stephen, let's go to you, because you've been quite quiet. So if you want to respond to what Gideon says and also what Cenk said about Mahmoud Abbas being the main figurehead that can actually go forward.
Yeah, I mean, the Palestinian Authority needs to be empowered to some extent by the Israeli government. I mean, you need to have somebody that you negotiate with. You need to have somebody that represents a position that represents the Palestinian people. And without having that person or without having that entity being empowered to be that representative, you have nobody to argue with or nobody to negotiate with. The big issue, I mean, this is something I've been saying for a long time, and I think it's still just as true. And I think all of us agree on half of it. But then I'll say the other half that nobody will agree with is that right now, neither side is motivated to make any kind of real peace. If you were an Israeli, you'd be stupid to make peace. Nobody is telling you not to do whatever it is you want to do. They've had a lot of military success over the past few months. They're going to continue to shore up their demographic majorities in parts of Area C. They're going to continue to annex parts of it. And that's just, why wouldn't they do that? Why wouldn't you do that if you were an Israeli and you wanted more and more territory? If you were Palestinian, why would you accept any deal that Israel would ever offer you when the ICC is asking for arrest warrants for Netanyahu, when the ICJ might declare that Israel is a genocidal country, when other people are saying that Israel is an apartheid occupying nation? Why would you ever make a deal with somebody that's so evil? So I think everybody right now is just kind of being pushed to the brink by all of the kind of conditions that are set up, a lot of them kind of pushed internationally. And until that changes, until somebody goes in and they basically say like, hey, Palestinians, you guys have 2 weeks to make a deal or we're cutting off all your foreign aid. Hey, Israel, you guys have 2 weeks to make a deal or we're cutting off all your military support. Like there has to be like a pressure created on the ground where people are like, okay, well, fuck, we have to actually figure out like what we're going to do now, because now like stuff's going to get really bad if we don't. And until that pressure exists, I mean, both sides are basically incentivized to carry on fighting with each other forever.
Oh, and do you think that can happen now? And do you think so? When that is that, you know, should Israel immediately get out that right now, even before that happens, should Israel already get out their troops in Gaza? You don't like right now; it's not such an issue.
I mean, I'm of the opinion that the long term that Israel is playing a dangerous game. They have been. That concept started by Menachem Begin, the capsule theory that we can just negotiate with every single person except for the Palestinians, and maybe sometime in the future they'll disappear or whatever. I guess go up in smoke. That's a stupid idea, and it's a dangerous game that's probably taking everybody in that region off a cliff. So I think for the long term health of the country, they should do something, but. I mean, my understanding is now, I haven't checked for a few days, but I think Netanyahu is popular again, or maybe it was like 47% popularity in that country. The thing is that like, it's just been such a string of, especially loaded at the end here, a lot of military success. For Hamas, they got Haniyeh, they got Mohammed Deif, they got Sinwar, they got all three of the top dudes. And then for Hezbollah, the pager attack worked really well. They killed Nasrallah, who they'd spent so much time going after. So I mean, after such a string of military successes, after basically smacking off 2 Iranian separate strikes, I mean, you got to be feeling good militarily in the position that Israel's in. And then Trump is elected, who is basically a sycophant for whatever's popular, and Israel's popular with older people in the U.S. So yeah, I don't know where that pressure is going to come from right now to tell Israel to like, hey, slow down, because it seems like they've been rewarded for everything they've done over the past year, basically. On a short term, I mean, I would say if you're looking at it short-sightedly, I think that's what the appearance would be in Israel.
Okay, and then I also just want to ask you, Stephen, one more question, then we'll go elsewhere. So Gideon made the point saying, let's not focus on peace. Let's focus on right now what's happening in Gaza. Do you think there's a genocide happening right now in Gaza?
No, but that's a whole other. I'm not. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
So what is it?
What is it's a war? What do you mean?
42,000 civilians being killed, 20,000 of them women and children. That's the way war goes.
I mean, sometimes it is, especially when the other.
Them.
Well, here's a question: do you think that Hamas intentionally fights to induce civilian casualties?
Yeah, no.
Both parties do it.
Okay, so if you're not willing to admit that, you don't live in reality. Like, I don't know what to say.
No,
like,
no.
It's not. Yeah.
So I can answer it. So listen, this whole thing of let's call the insurgents terrorists, and that allows us to not only kill anyone resisting our occupation, but any civilian that's near them, which in Gaza is all the civilians, is just an excuse for further occupation. So I'm not in favor of Hamas. I'm not in favor of killing civilians. I think it's terrible. I think it's a stupid strategy on top of an immoral strategy. But we're all pretending like that it's not an insurgency. Of course it's an insurgency. That's what any people that have been occupied throughout all of history have at some point fought back. And did they fight back with flowers and roses and cupcakes? No, they fight back usually violently. And when that happens, the occupying power says, great, now I'm justified in hating you more, occupying you more, oppressing and humiliating you more. And because now you're the bad guy because you dared to fight back against me. Don't you know your role? I mean, yesterday in the debate, I'm dealing with an Israeli representative basically saying that, well, no, since they don't love us, they have indoctrinated, and this happens in almost every debate, they've indoctrinated their children to not like Jews. What a preposterous argument. Were the Armenians supposed to indoctrinate their kids to love the Turks? And that would be our prerequisite for letting the Armenians go? No, first, even though we've occupied you for hundreds of years and oppressed and humiliated you and killed you ad nauseum, our precondition for peace and for ending the occupation is not only do you not have to hate us, but you have to love us first. That's absurd. Utterly, utterly absurd. And it's an impossible standard meant to prevent peace. So that's super obvious. I want to ask Destiny a question. So when they go to get the land, are you still going to claim it was to defend themselves? Or when they go to get the land acquisition, it has now become clear that this was never about defense. This was about offense. And it was all about stealing Arab land.
So I think it's a reductionist way to look at it. I think that the way that the history of Israel has worked is, I think Israel has, for the most part, said there are political realities on the ground, and we will confine ourselves to the areas that we must. But if you give us the opportunity to, we will take whatever we can from you. I think that's been the dual position that Israel has inhabited historically. So there was a time where after 48, Israel was like, okay, well, this is it. And as they approached 67, they're like, this is the land we have. And like, please, like, don't fight. We're just whatever. Don't attack us. Like, we're good. We have no security guarantees from the West. Everyone around us is really mad. But a war happens and they managed to get a lot of land from it. And I think that that's just like the history of Israel. So I still would maintain the position that taking territory in Gaza is stupid. I don't think that they would. Is it possible some permanent security apparatus might remain there? Maybe, but like moving settlements and everything back in, I still don't think that would happen. But I mean, if it did happen, it wouldn't change anything prior to this, which is like the war doesn't become retroactively unjustified. The issue is still that there is an opposite side to Israel that is constantly giving it legitimate reason for war and then creating the opportunities for land seizure afterwards.
Reason for war. How dare you resist our oppression of you?
October 7th was not resistance. That wasn't resistance. That was just like mass slaughter and rape of civilians. That was not resistance. What do you mean? October 7th was not a resistance attack.
I mean, this is absurd. The African National Congress originally killed civilians. Again, it's a counterproductive.
The ANC explicitly had a policy of not trying to kill civilians. They literally explicitly had a policy of targeting government infrastructure. They did for a while, and then they changed it because Mandela was like, hey, this is probably not a good idea. This is kind of making us look horrible, and now nobody's going to be on our side. Yeah.
But as Gideon, the Palestinians went to the UN, right? They couldn't ask for a more peaceful solution. And Israel said, no, this is terrible. How dare they try diplomacy? Diplomacy is terrorism. So the UN, they've tried everything. They've tried everything. And every time they try peace, nobody ever covers it. The propagandists in American media go, no, the Palestinians are always guilty. My whole life growing up Muslim here in America, every piece of media was Muslims are terrible. Muslims are savages. Muslims are terrorists. Muslims are dark and backwards. I'm sick of it. So the people who are guilty in this case is not the Muslims, is not the Palestinians. They are David. They are being crushed. And Goliath is guilty. And it is obvious. And the fact that Israel can't see that they are monstrous Goliath at this point is, again, it's heartbreaking because I don't want them to be that. So look, I'm bringing it back to Gideon. The only thing I can imagine, you're right, brother, when you say outside pressure is the only thing that could possibly work. Cutting the funding from America, maybe that could happen under Trump. But that's, again, a very small hope given that he's given Miriam Adelson everything that she wants, and our current position is Israel first. But another possibility is an worldwide economic boycott. I mean, aren't we definitely at that point, no one buy Israeli products. Obviously, you'd be crazy to go to Israel. I mean, there's a lawless nation. I mean, if you're Muslim, they would just kill you. They kill Muslim American journalists. They kill Muslim Americans, sniper shots. So it's a murderous state. So obviously, nobody should go to Israel, and no one should buy Israeli products. And the economic boycott should be so thorough. There should be such a pariah that it creates leverage and that they feel pain, but not physical, not killing people, but economic pain enough to turn around. What do you think about that?
Gideon, I want to go to Jane. I just want to ask you quickly about that. Why didn't we focus any attention on Iran? You're saying boycott Israel. Why not any attention to Iran?
So look, all of this is in reaction to the occupation. So do I think the Iranian regime is bad? Of course. They're Muslim extremists. They're terrible to their own people. They're kleptocrats. They under the guise of religion, they rob the place blind. This is what extremists do all the time. So, but you're not going to be able to stop Iran or Lebanon or the 1.6 billion Muslims from being enraged about the occupation. And by the way, because of the occupation, the Iranian regime has an excuse. They go, oh, we are helping our fellow brothers, and that is why you should keep supporting us, because we're the only ones defending the Muslims, right? And once you take that excuse away from the Iranian regime, I bet it collapses faster than we could possibly imagine. Because at that point, they have no plausible reason for oppressing their own people. So that, like, if you want to get rid of the Iranian regime, do a peace deal, get rid of the occupation, and the Iranian people will rise up against Iran. If you bomb Iran, they're going to rally around the Ayatollah. It is the most counterproductive, ridiculous. In fact, to be fair to Netanyahu, who's a very smart guy, he's one of the most evil men of my lifetime. He's one of the biggest terrorists of my lifetime. If there was any justice in the world, he would rot in prison the rest of his life. But he is brilliant. And why do you think he's trying to provoke Iran and start a war with Iran? Because he knows that the Iranian people will rally around the Ayatollah and the extremists will dig in, and it will be a permanent state of war, which benefits Netanyahu.
Gideon, do you want to talk about Iran and what do you think Israel should do with that?
I would like to ask Cenk, and not that I have the answer, but same might happen in Israel. You'll put a world boycott on Israel, which I'm in favor. But there is a danger that Israelis will become tougher and more united around Netanyahu because we are under siege, because the whole world hates us. It might have the opposite effect. Not that I know.
So, Gideon, you're not wrong. Like, I don't know. No one knows what effect it'll have, except we do have some examples, right? So, look, that's why I get so frustrated at terrorism. It's clearly not the right answer. It almost never works. What works is Mandela in South Africa, Gandhi in India, Martin Luther King in America, right? And so I think that there could be a way to humiliate Israel and show to the world their deep immorality if the members of Hamas instead of trying to kill Israeli civilians, if they allowed themselves to be killed one by one by one in front of the whole world. But that's a whole separate thing and a very, very, very implausible. So let's back to the economic boycott. It did work in South Africa. It did.
Yeah.
And so, and by the way, the Egyptian revolution happened not because of the protests, not because of Twitter, but because of a general strike where all of the labor shut down the business interest in Egypt. And the business interest said, okay, we'll get rid of Hosni Mubarak. And so that's the second time that an economic boycott of a sort has worked. And I'm sure that there are many other examples. You're right. In the beginning, certainly, it will cause Israel to dig in. But after the economic siege, there will be great frustration built in. And my guess is at some point, the Israeli people go, well, Netanyahu and the right wing promised us, all of these wonderful things and a wonderful economy and a wonderful life. And we had it for a while, when we were just killing all the Palestinians and taking their land and there was no repercussions. But now there's significant repercussions. Now we're having trouble feeding ourselves. Then pressure begins to build on the right wing and people begin to realize it's not the right way to go. And most importantly, the business interests have no interest in losing money. Once they start losing money, that's where the power lies. Right, in the top 10%. And
Yeah,
once
but
they
the
start
issue,
losing money, that's when they start putting pressure on the government.
I think the issues with the other examples, though, is that you have like a clear path, or you have like a clear ask for what peace looks like, right? The issue is for Palestine and Israel, there's not even an agreed upon like solution that's like a final settlement of all the problems. It's not even like no one even knows what that looks like. I don't know if the I don't know if the Israelis would accept. The Palestinians have never put out like this is we would be happy with this. So what is it? What are people even building towards?
There's so many answers to that. So first of all the Arab nations have already offered a peace deal that is perfectly acceptable. And what we're negotiating is how much of the West Bank is Israel going to keep for the settlers, right? So that's a
I don't think that's
relatively straightforward negotiation. In 2008, I'm curious what Gideon thinks, but I agree with him that the Rabin offers were way overhyped by the American propaganda machine. But the Ehud Omer deal in 2008 could have been workable. Certainly the 1967 borders are workable. So there's a lot of perfectly reasonable solutions.
None of those are difficult questions. No one cares about the land apportionment. Your big issue is kind of holy sites, but also it's the right of return. That's the huge thing on the table that nobody wants to address. And I think Gideon might even be in favor of the full like 5, 6, 7 million people have the right to go back into Israel proper. This will never happen. Any type of arrangement that has this as like a requirement, which the Arab Peace League essentially has, and which the Palestinians have negotiated in the past, that nobody wants to take the right of return of anybody off the table, going back to Israel proper, not just the West Bank or the Gaza Strip, is that it'll just never happen.
No, so Destiny is right that if the final offer is right of return, that will never happen. Okay. But they can't give away the right of return now. They'll lose all leverage. The peace deal is so obvious because it's so obvious that the Palestinians have to give up the right of return. And right, that could be heartbreaking for them. And they've held on to that dream since 1948. But that dog won't hunt. There's no way in the world Israel will allow right of return. So the solution is actually, again, very straightforward. The Palestinians give up the right of return. Largely, there's a small symbolic right of return. Israel gives up the territories. Look, guys, this idea that the peace deal is impossible or, oh my God, it's such an unsolvable riddle is, again, totally not elusive. It's not true. It's not even remotely true. It's actually very straightforward once you actually want peace.
So let's go to Gideon because, Gideon, do you want to tell us your thoughts on that?
First of all, I totally agree with Cenk that, first of all, you have to want peace, and we are not there. And we are not there not only, I keep on saying it, not only because of Netanyahu, because the world tends to think that the problem is Netanyahu, and once we get rid of Netanyahu, Israel will turn back to become the paradise that we knew. No, my friends, this is not the case. The alternative to Netanyahu on many matters will be better than him. On the question of occupation, apartheid, two-state solution, it will be the same. There is no statesman in Israel, in the left, in the center left, who will do anything different. None of them is ready even to stop the war now. None of them. None of them is ready for the two-state solution. None of them. So to put everything on Netanyahu is to do our life easier. It's serving in many ways the Israeli propaganda because, there is now one obstacle. It's called Netanyahu. Let's get rid of him and then everything will be fine. No. I must remind you that all the basis for the occupation, the basis for the settlement project was not put by Netanyahu and not by the right-wingers. It was all put by the Israeli Labor Party. They are the founding fathers and mothers of the occupation project. And let's not forget this. And they didn't change. And they still believe in those values. We have to get to the core of the issues if we really want to solve it, a real solution, and not just an agreement, a hollow agreement. We have to change basic values. Zionism today means Jewish supremacy between the river and the sea. There is no other way to describe it. And Israelis will not give up the Jewish supremacy. And as long as they don't give up, the Jewish supremacy, they will not be peace, and they cannot be peace. We have to change the whole mindset. As long as we believe that Jews have more rights than Palestinians because they are terrorists, because they are animals, because the Bible promised us this land, because we are the promised people, you name it. But as long as this is the mindset, and it is the mindset in Israel, there are very few Israelis who think that Palestinians deserve the same like Israel. Even they are leftists, they say, yes, they deserve humanitarian aid, and they deserve respect, and they deserve food and work. And no, they deserve exactly what we deserve, not 1 gram less. And as long as this mindset doesn't change, I don't see how we can get to a real solution. We can get to another Oslo, which will give us few years of illusion and few years of hope. And above all, we are lacking leadership. Maybe it will emerge, but right now in both peoples, there is no leadership that can lead anything, neither in Israel nor among the Palestinians. You don't even see it coming in the next generation. I hope I'm wrong.
Gideon, do you support, you said you support an economic boycott of Israel, of Israeli products and services, right?
It's not only economic, it can be culture, it can be military. I support anything which will put Israelis being accountable for what is being done on our behalf. We have to pay for it. We have to realize that we are accountable for terrible crimes, and those crimes call for punishment. And as long as every Israeli will not understand it, that what is being done now is unacceptable, then it will continue like this. Israelis still believe that they have the right to slaughter 42,000 people in Gaza, and there is no problem with it. They still believe that killing children by masses, by thousands, is something that Israel is allowed to do.
But Gideon,
yes.
you're living in Israel, if I'm correct, so your tax dollars are going towards this.
So are ours.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm an American. Mine are too.
Yeah, much more, by the way. Yes, this is true. So, yeah, but there's no one who has any doubts about it that this is necessary. You see, we had refuseniks in former wars in the army, not many, but they were, and quite vocal. Now, if they are only in gray zones. Everyone is serving in Gaza with a lot of enthusiasm, without giving himself any kind of moral report. What is he doing and why is he doing it? So as long as this is the situation, how can we get to any kind of peace?
You know, I just came up with an idea. Why don't we create sympathy for the Palestinians within Israel by the whole world saying, we're going to treat the Israelis like Palestinians. We're going to do a blockade of Israel, just like Israel does a blockade of the Palestinians. We're going to say nothing gets in, no weapons, no money, nothing. Okay, just like Israel completely controls 5.5 million Palestinians, the rest of the world is going to shun Israel, and we're going to say, good luck. You have to survive on what you have in Israel, and what you're doing is so morally depraved that we don't want to participate in it. We don't want our tax dollars going to it. We don't want our own dollars going to it. So if you're going to do this kind of genocide and land theft and colonialism and imperialism and brutalize these poor people, we can't go in and rescue them militarily. So we're going to try to rescue them economically. And all we're doing is we're treating you the same way you're treating the Palestinians. And if you don't like that, then treat the Palestinians differently. And the minute you treat the Palestinians in a way that is decent and reasonable, the world will then open up and treat you in a way that is decent and reasonable. You can't ask for anything more fair than that. If you say, no, I should be able to brutalize the Palestinians and there should be no consequences, well, I know that they'll say that, but that's an absurd position, right? And Gideon said punishment. Look, that's for the Israelis to deal with on their own in terms of how they struggle with their own morality, right? But for me, it's not about punishment. It's about getting to peace and building the leverage to get to peace. And the only way to build that leverage is to isolate Israel and for the rest of the world to say, what you're doing is completely and utterly unacceptable, and we're not going to accept it. We're gonna isolate you to the point it creates massive leverage for peace. So look, guys, everybody watching, start now. Check products, make sure they're not made in Israel. Don't buy anything from Israel. Don't ever trade with Israel. Don't ever spend $1 to Israel. Start a giant worldwide economic boycott of Israel. Anyone who tells you, no, Israel is owed profits on top of what they're doing, I mean, that's absurd. It's insanity. And look, I want to paint a vision of a beautiful Israel that we all love. Imagine that they do a two-state solution. Let's say, I mean, my God, I know there's too much to hope for, but along the lines of the 1967 borders. And then they say, and here, I'll give you an example before I tell you what I'm going to say. Erdogan is the leader of Turkey, and a guy I disagree with. He's right-wing. He's more fundamentalist. Everyone I know votes against him in Turkey. We're on the secular side, etc. But there's one positive side of Erdogan. Whenever the Muslims in the world are hurt, Erdogan shows up. There's a natural disaster somewhere, Erdogan sends aid. And he does it so consistently that whenever I run into other Arabs or Muslims in any situation, they say, oh, we love Erdogan, because whenever we're in trouble, the Turks show up to save us. Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Now imagine if Israel did that for the whole world. And anytime there's a natural disaster, there's something terrible, Israel shows up to help. And then when they see an Israeli plane, instead of thinking, oh my God, here are the murderers that are going to kill our children, they think, oh, thank God the Israelis are here. We're saved. Wouldn't that be amazing? And then you have a safe Jewish haven just like you wanted. And the world begins to, instead of hating you, loving you. Why not go in that direction?
Let me answer you. You are wrong in both sides. You are wrong. This is the easy side. Israel is sending rescue teams to everywhere in the world and had big successes. And I always asked, what is this hypocrisy? Why do you say, by the way, including to the last earthquake in Turkey, in which rescue teams from Israel really saved people under the rubble. But what is much more important, you speak as if the world is ready to boycott Israel. I have my doubts. Public opinions are ready to boycott Israel, not governments. For the governments, Israel is still the darling of the West. There were some riots in Amsterdam last week in a football game. Tonight, Israel is playing against France. President Macron is attending the game tonight in order to show that he's protecting the Israeli players. The world is not there. Europe is not there. Europe is still paralyzed by the notion that any criticism of Israel is anti-Semitism, and they are very careful about it. Very, very, not only Germany, all over Europe. In many places, look at their legislations. Soon it will be illegal to say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. In the United States, they want already to legislate something. It will become a crime to say it. So you portray a world in which the governments we are not in the same place. The public opinions, yes. The governments, far from it. Very far from it.
No, Gideon,
The world continues to hug Israel and to enable Israel, and not only the United States, and to enable Israel to do things that no other country in the world could have done.
So I know we're out of time now, but Gideon, I just want to say, no, of course I agree with you. I think the Western governments are deeply, deeply corrupt. The American government can easily be purchased by any foreign power, and it has been by Saudi Arabia and Israel and all the corporations in the world, etc. So it's nearly irredeemable. I'm talking about the people of the world making that decision and beginning to enact it. Will all 8 billion do it right out of the gate? Of course not. But let's start it now. Okay, hashtag Israeli boycott, whatever hashtag you want to use. I don't care if you don't use a hashtag. I don't care if it goes on Twitter or not. All I care is that everybody starts doing it. And maybe it starts with just 1 million people. Maybe it gets to 100 million. Maybe it gets to 1 billion. But
this
an
is happening.
uprising of the
Cenk,
actual
this is
people of the
happening.
world.
So wait,
This is happening. This is happening.
yeah. Let's give Stephen a chance to respond, and then Cenk, I think then we'll finish. Yeah. Stephen, I mean, if you look at the Cenk and Gideon have been saying, an Israeli boycott. I mean, not talking about Iran, but Israeli boycott. What's your thoughts on that?
I don't think it'll do much. I mean, like, if you want to have this idea of, well, we're going to start treating Israel like they treat the Palestinians, then Israel would simply say, okay, well, we're just going to start acting like the Palestinians. And the first people that are going to go back on your boycott are going to be Jordan and Egypt, because they're going to say, well, hold on. We don't want to feel like we are living next to somebody who feels like they can attack us with impunity, bomb us with impunity, kill all of our civilians with impunity. Like, for real, not the, like, they do the bombing and some people are killed after leaflets and warnings or whatever, but like, we're going to go in and just like murder as many civilians as we possibly can, which is how Hamas acts when they have the ability to operate. They kill as many people as they can. So
you mean like Israel's doing now?
Do you think that Israel right now is killing as many people as they can?
So this is the same argument I used to make when I used to defend the Armenian genocide. Well, we didn't kill them all. Well, there were Armenians.
I never said that. I'm asking a very simple question. Do you think Israel is killing as many civilians as they can right now?
I think they're killing as many civilians as they think is palatable.
Do you think that when Hamas does attacks, do you think Hamas thinks we can only kill as many as is palatable?
Well, they only have a limited amount of power. So look,
exactly. So are they killing as many as they can, or
Destiny? This is a power dynamic. This isn't
no,
about.
You can't use power dynamic to try to explain away every abhorrent action. This is exactly why Jewish people don't trust the rest of the world when people say things like it's a power dynamic. So that's why we can't help, or we can't say, or we can't do anything. And it's like, okay, because Israel says we're a power dynamic. We're however many 10 million Jews against 20 billion Arabs. Like, it's a power dynamic, right? It's the same argument.
You sound exactly like the Ottoman Empire. Well, the Armenians are killing civilians and they don't have any bounds. So why should we have any bounds? Well, because you're the Ottoman Empire and you could easily kill them all. And in fact, you did. You killed a lot of them. And then their excuse was, well, they were killing us and they had no restraint. So we had no restraint. But brother, you have all the power and they have none of the power. That's why you killed so many of them. And then they said the same exact thing you're saying today. Well, we didn't kill them all.
I've never said they didn't kill them all. I'm saying that Israel clearly restrains themselves. That's very obvious. I don't believe that Hamas restrains themselves. I think that's pretty obvious. So the idea of treating Israel like they treat the Palestinians is just kind of, I just don't think it's realistic. I think Israel would, if they felt like they had literally nothing to gain by acting within any kind of international norm, I think that the deaths and the ethnic cleansings and the explosions would be 500 million times worse. It would be on a whole other level of.
You have ironically, you have a much darker view of the Israelis than I do. So, I mean, you think if they are treated with equality and justice, that they will strike out and kill everyone around them. I hope not. I hope.
That is the language of the Middle East, right? And has been for
don't blame the Muslims
for
this. It's not the language of the Middle East.
Who said anything about Muslims?
The language of Israel.
Hold on, Turkey are Turkish people. Okay, Persians in Iran. You have Muslims and Arabs as well. You have Israelis and Jews. Like, it's not just one people. The language of the Middle East has been a language of. Hold on, I'm sorry. Wait, do you think there were like all the caliphates were accomplished by conquest? All of the Middle East over the past 100 years has been embroiled in bitter war with each other, whether from Pakistan to Iran, Iraq to Yemen to North Africa. I mean, like, are we denying that? Or
so look, what you're doing is you're conflating two different things. Throughout the history of the world, everybody did conquest, they did slaughters. The Mongols did it, the Europeans did it, the caliphates did it. Everyone did it. Okay, so it was universal. So that's the past. Then after World War II, we enter the modern era. And in the modern era, there's this image of, oh my God, the Middle East is it's in so much turmoil. There's so much violence. Oh, they're so irredeemable, right? No.
Wait, I didn't say anything about irredeemable. And it is insane for you to say that after World War II, everything was just peachy. That is absolutely not true. Iraq-Iran war happened. Saddam Hussein happened. The Kuwait invasion happened. The Yemen civil wars has happened. The Syrian civil wars. The idea that it's been just peachy after World War II is completely detached from reality.
Peachy, but what you're trying to get into people's heads is, don't worry about the Middle East. Bunch of violent people always killing each other. No, Europe is 10,000 times more violent, if we're being honest.
I'm
And
not.
I know that
First of
really
all, I don't
hurts
even
the
think I
feelings
would
of white Christians, but Europe is by far the most violent continent in the history of the world by a landslide. By a landslide. But in American media, Middle East dark and violent. Oh, Europe enlightened and Western civilization. It's propaganda to make you think, oh, the Muslims are violent.
You're
and they had
botching.
it coming. They had
you're-
it coming.
Yeah, you're fighting against ghosts here. I'm not gonna. I'm an American, okay? I don't like Europe. Fuck them. All right. I'm not here to defend European history. I'm just saying that in the Middle East, your civilization is what you can make it. Your borders are what you can carve in blood. That's essentially how people have conducted themselves there, Israelis included, and that seems to be the only language that anybody can hear or anybody can respect. So that's how people there, Israelis included, will continue to conduct themselves. That's all I'm saying. Is that's the expectation.
No, Israel and Egypt did a peace deal. It worked great.
After what? After Israel saw itself on the brink of annihilation in 73 from territory that they conquered in 67.
But the idea that the Middle East will always be at war is totally wrong.
I never said it would always be at war. There are paths for it to not be at war. I think it's possible. I think that the 2 million Arab Palestinians that live in Israel are proof of that people can live together side by side in peace and in harmony. It's definitely possible. I don't think it's impossible, but
I think the great majority of the wars in the Middle East were started by Israel and America. And then we blame the local populations for us killing them. They had it coming. The Middle East is irredeemable. They're always violent. And so we had to kill them and we had to invade them. Iraq didn't invade us. We invaded Iraq. And by the way, why the hell did we invade Iraq? They didn't need to do 9/11 at all.
Well, the first time it was because
to realize, oh, wait a minute. Who was in favor of attacking Iraq? Oh, right, Netanyahu. Huh, funny how that worked out.
Wait, why was Netanyahu in favor of attacking Iraq?
He was a neocon that was 100% clear. They wanted to attack 7 Arab nations. And
I think Netanyahu wanted to attack Iraq because in the first Gulf War, Saddam Hussein was firing off Scud missiles at Israel. I think Netanyahu, Israel, had good reason not to like Iraq.
So you're admitting it. America did that monstrous, horrible war in Iraq in favor of Netanyahu and Israel.
The first or second Gulf?
One.
Oh, actually, the first one. Netanyahu was 95. I don't remember the first time he came in. But I'm just saying that there's good reason for the first Gulf War for Iraq. The second one, obviously, stupid. I'm not going to sit here and defend that. But there's been plenty of other conflicts. Yemen has been embroiled in conflict for a century. The Iraq-Iran war was a massive conflict between the two countries. I think over 1 million people died. The whole Syrian civil war has been a massive conflict. The Soviets invading Afghanistan. It's just all sorts of
Okay, so Gideon, do you want to say something last because you haven't said anything for a few minutes, and then we'll finish up, and that'll be the last thing.
No, I enjoyed every minute, and we see that the more we talk, the more issues are coming up. It's very complicated on one hand, and it's very simple on the other hand. And those who say that is impossible, and again, I find myself agreeing with Cenk, it is possible. But many things must change. Very, very, very basic things. And above all, there is no symmetry. The change must start and come mainly from Israel. Because Israel is the strong one, Israel is the occupier, and Israel has to change itself. That's not enough, but that's the core issue.
I think that's really changes. I really like that. Changes really complicated on one hand, or is the situation really complicated on one hand, very simple on the other hand. It's a really good point. Well, thank you all for joining. I think it was an interesting conversation.
Can I add one more final thing? I'll agree with Cenk too. The change is not complicated. It's painful. That's the issue. I don't know if Cenk realizes it, but what he said earlier about Palestinians giving up the right of return, that is a painful concession. That has to be matched on the Israeli side with a painful concession, like a big withdrawal from the West Bank, like 500,000 settlers gone or part of the new Palestinian state. So if one side is willing to make a painful concession, then the other side should be. And I think that's the big issue. It's not that it's complicated. It's that people don't have things they want to give up that are very painful to give up. Yeah.
That's amazing.
I think we all
totally
agree
at
about
the
this.
end.
Yeah,
I'm happy we're finishing on an agreement.
Yes.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you,